Welcome to Cattle Connect, your insight into Alabama's beef cattle industry. I'm your host, Kayla Greer, and this is Cattle Connect, brought to you by the Alabama Cattlemen's Association.
Hey there, Cattlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Cattle Connect podcast. I hope you have all been enjoying these crisp mornings. They certainly have me anxious for the fall weather on the horizon. But before we turn our attention to the fall entirely, we've got a summer program that we need to highlight first. To help me do that, I've got Daniel Adams in the studio, and in just a moment, I'm going to have Daniel tell us a little bit about himself. But to tease this episode just a bit, Daniel represented Alabama this summer at a conference that took him from just about coast to coast. It's the National Cattlemen's Beef Association's Young Cattlemen's Conference, and it starts out in Colorado, and by way of a few stops, it ultimately ends in Washington, D.C. But before we get into the details of this trip, I want you all to think back to the very first episode of the Cattle Connect podcast where Aaron and I talked about how the podcast came to life. And we mentioned a conversation that happened in D.C. during a YCLP advocacy trip that finally just pushed us over the edge to launch the podcast. Well, Daniel was part of that conversation, so it truly is my pleasure to welcome you to the Cattle Connect studio.
Well, I'm certainly excited to be here. And you know what? I can look back remembering that exact conversation. I can almost remember seeing the look between you and Aaron when Andy brought that up.
There was definitely some eyes.
Yes, it was. So it was pretty neat to kind of see it back then before the idea had come to what it is today now. So it's pretty cool to look back on.
And now today we're on the 27th episode of the podcast. So that's exciting. But Daniel, I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear a little bit about you. So why don't you give us your elevator speech and include in that some of your involvement with the ACA and the YCLP?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Daniel Adams from Adams Angus Farm over there in Union Springs, Alabama. We've been in operation since 1939 when my great-granddad, Sidney, actually bought the first 4 registered Angus open heifers, and it's kind of been off to the races ever since. And so we primarily operate still all Angus operation with a bull sale in January and a female sale in May that we host some other consigners with in on us that. But yeah, and then to just go in my own involvement with the Cattlemen's Association, that really has been established through the YCLP program. And the Class 7, I got the opportunity to be a part of that. And just what an amazing experience it was to truly get me entrenched in Cattlemen's. It was just a fantastic experience from the different weekend sessions and the people I got to know along the way and the relationships I still have today.
And today we're on Class 11, so he alluded to he was in Class 7, so that was about 4 years ago, yep. And here he is still involved, so great testament to that program. And that's just a perfect segue into the topic of today's episode. It was through your involvement with the Young Cattlemen's Leadership Program Council that got you tapped to represent Alabama at YCC. So basically, each state has the opportunity to nominate a participant to attend YCC on that state's behalf. And then that nominee goes on this trip across the nation to explore the American beef cattle industry. And what is that, about 9 days, Daniel?
Yep, 9 days.
9 or 10 days. So that's a long time away from the farm. I bet you have a whole new appreciation for the phrase, there's no place like home.
Oh, for sure. and at the same time, just to feel like to call it the trip of a lifetime is almost an understatement somehow, too. I mean, it was just an incredible experience.
So that's a perfect segue right there, Daniel. And I'm going to toss you a softball here and ask you to tell us about the trip from start to finish. What all did you experience?
Sure. Yeah. So first day, Thursday, we flew into Denver, had a little bit of a social hour that night where we really got to know each other. There was 66 of us total on the trip. So
a lot of folks to tote around.
It was a lot of folks, and it was a week long, or
more than
a week adventure of getting to know everybody on the trip for sure. But that really got things kicked off the right way, and because at the end of the day, a lot of the trip was just about the relationships made too, and that's a lot of where it started. Next day, NCBA headquarters, we kind of got the full overview of everything NCBA does for us. Full tour of headquarters there. Just an overview. Colin Woodall came in, spoke to us. CattleFax also housed right there out of the headquarter office. So we got a kind of a market update on where things are, and a lot of leadership training also while we were in the DC office, and kind of talking about leaning into our strengths necessarily instead of leaning into the areas where maybe we're not as excellent. because we'll make a whole lot more growth in the areas that we are really good at than necessarily in the traits that maybe we don't.
That makes a lot of sense.
So well. So a lot of good stuff coming from that first day out of the Denver office. The next day, this is when we really started our industry trips. So that was a lot of fun. We went over to Five Rivers Feed Yard out there just outside of Greeley, Colorado. And that was really my second time through a feed yard, but this was on a massive scale compared to the last one. I mean, this is a 100,000 head feed yard. They were only at about 80,000 head capacity, but to say only 80,000 is kind of ridiculous too.
Yeah, that is. I agree with that statement. It's something you have to see with your own eyes to be able to comprehend it. I went out to Hereford, Texas when I was a senior in college and had never seen anything close to a feed yard before. And so it's very eye-opening.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's just a sea of cattle out there, and to see that, that's our beef for the U.S.
And that's our end goal here is cow-calf producers and seed stock producers here in the state of Alabama. That's where our cattle go, and that's just interesting to see the other side of it.
So it was fantastic. Morning spent there. Maybe it was afternoon, but from there we went over to Greeley Hat Works, which Trent is always a highlight of anything that he is ever a part of. And so we got to eat dinner there and kind of see how he got his work started and fitting these really just awesome custom hats for folks. And then a little bit more time with some beef advocacy training the next morning in the Denver office before we headed out for Dakota Dunes to see the Tyson plant out there. And that was my first time through a packing facility that way. And I mean, it's really eye-opening to the whole process of what that part of the industry and how crucial they are for us. Because when you think about, they're running 5,000 head through a day.
Yeah.
And we're doing barely 10 to 12,000 custom alone in our state in a year. And I mean, and they're just so far. I mean, it was really a cool experience, and watching the knives on the cutting floor and how everything is just a machine through that whole plant. It was just mind blowing.
A very well-oiled machine.
Oh, yes.
Yep, I will second that. In that same trip where I saw the feed yard, we also went to a Tyson plant there in Hereford, Texas, and it is, if you ever get the opportunity, any of our listeners out there, if you ever get the opportunity, go. I think it's so important to see that side of the industry as somebody who's involved in it on the day-to-day and on the live cattle side. It's just a really cool experience to see that other side of the industry that we don't get to see all the time.
Mm-hmm. So, fantastic morning. While we were doing that, we were split into two groups. The other half of us was at Empirical Foods, so we swapped places in the middle of that. And Empirical Foods really focuses on taking some of those lower value cuts, those no rolls that aren't even necessarily up to a standard or select value, and trying to add value back to them, making these steaks just add kind of almost injecting marbling back into them. So it was kind of a neat philosophy.
It just tells that sustainability story. We like to say we use everything but the moo, and there are cuts that don't qualify as any kind of grading.
Yep.
And we want to do something with that. We don't want that to be waste. So insert Empirical Foods.
Yep. So good afternoon spent there. We flew out for Ohio after that to go over to see Certified Angus Beef. And
I'm sure you like that stop.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Second time through there. If you ever find yourself in Worcester, Ohio, go by at lunchtime, preferably, because they will feed you, and it is fantastic. Their chefs on site are incredible. Leading up, going into that, we actually went to some local grocers first to really see the end user side of it, the consumer, and how they spend so much time meticulously, with the work on the packaging and just everything they can to promote beef better and attract the eyes of the customers as they go through the store, was really fascinating. And, we had some fun playing around with the plant-based meats and the actual beef at the same time too, and looking at the ingredients list of each. And you got one that just says beef and the other one with words that you can't even say properly.
Yeah,
and so we had a lot of fun kind of toying around with that. And then CAB just kind of went into, it over the years, how they've grown into just, the machine that they are now, and how they add so much value back for our industry throughout the U.S. It's amazing the amount of dollars that go through there, but it's raised up what the customer wants today, and that is an enhanced eating experience, and that is something that's really driven the market for.
Yeah, and that fits in perfectly with kind of what we call our consumer market here in the state of Alabama. National Cattlemen's Beef Association has done a really great job of doing market research and identifying different regions of this country and what the buying power is for those consumers. What are the drivers, the demand drivers as they're called? And here in Alabama, the eating experience is one of our demand drivers. We've got taste, we've got price, and we've got the experience. Other parts of the nation might care about how the animal was raised or there's different demand drivers, but here in Alabama, we know because everything is done around a meal here, that experience is so important. And then match that with the other demand driver, which is taste, and you have a product that you need to taste really good and create an experience for those consumers. So that's really cool that y'all got to see that and bring it back here and realize that is one of our demand drivers that helps us, that drives our Beef That's What's for Dinner campaign here in the state of Alabama.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it was, again, just another highlight stop of the trip for sure. And from there, it was kind of back to work as we flew off for D.C. and really saw kind of where NCBA does so much work for us on the policy side and playing defense every day, being aware of all the issues going on throughout the U.S., but especially on Capitol Hill, and trying to play defense for whatever may be getting introduced, because every day is a new day up there. And I'm especially grateful for the people that work up there because I don't know how they do it.
They've got such a good team and just a great resource for us as a state office, and so knowledgeable and so on top of their game. And yes, we agree with you that their defense is invaluable.
Yep.
Your membership matters. Join the ACA today and enjoy exclusive member benefits, including a subscription to the Alabama Cattleman magazine. Learn more today at bamabeef.org/join.
I mean, so they gave us, we spent a full day just kind of getting prepped for our Hill visits on Thursday, and all the different policies. It's a little bit regionalized on that, so the issues here in Alabama aren't necessarily the same as what they are in California or on the border in Texas, and all these different things that farmers throughout the U.S. are facing. And so it was a day spent there, a day doing our visits. After that, meeting with the staffs of our local representatives. They were out of session, unfortunately, that day.
They were enjoying some time at home.
That's right. Much earned time at home, too. And then we kind of just got to cap it all off with the YCC pack auction that night. And it was kind of a cool item for us because it was the first time that the pack was able to go over $1 million for NCBA, and the YCC got to be the one that got the job done.
Yeah,
so that was
great.
Really cool.
I had not heard that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really exciting. And I think, too, you can maybe bring back a little bit of appreciation in comparison to some of the friends that you made in YCC of maybe how lucky we are here in Alabama.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, when you talk about the issues that they're, Carlos Ochoa, that's, a friend that I made that's right there, their ranch is on the Texas border, and the issues they face with immigrant traffic, every day is so far removed from what we have to deal with here in Alabama, or to go to California Cattlemen's and Maureen LeGrand out there, and just the nonstop regulations they have to deal with. But it's eye-opening, too, because it makes you realize, hey, we need to make sure we keep these lines of contact open just in case whatever comes down the road, that we're fortunate we get to play a lot more offense here in our state.
Yeah.
And we need to take advantage of that for as long as we can, so we'll be able to play defense more easily later on down the line.
Yeah, I think that's a great nugget that you picked up while you were there. So after having experienced all of that, 10 days of just lots of American beef industry, literally from pasture to plate, I would love to hear about what maybe resonated with you the most. If you had to take just one or two things that you would say is the most valuable to you, what would it be?
It was the relationships, no doubt. I mean, I hadn't made mention of it much just going through the outline of the trip so far, but I mean, there were 66 people on that trip, and I got to really personally know 63 of them. And I can't express how awesome the trip was from that standpoint. And, I I have those friends at Kansas Livestock Association now and Virginia Cattlemen's and, throughout the U.S. that are in the same boat as me. They're young people going back into agriculture and they're passionate about it. And so it's nice to be able to pick up a phone and call them and, talk about what we're facing and the struggles we're dealing with, but just also encourage each other and that excitement too. And, just to know that there's people in the same boat with you is just comforting on so many levels. But I've made friends for a lifetime, friends I'm so excited to see in San Antonio here in a few months. And it was just the relationships is what I walked away with most at the end of the day.
That's great. Yeah. And, a lot of people say that about our state program here, the Young Cattlemen's Leadership Program. After every class, we do a little bit of a survey, and we do so many cool things with that program, lots of tours, lots of trainings, but everybody says it's the relationships that they take away that are just the most invaluable. And I think that's a testament to the fact that our industry is small.
Yep.
If you take our industry and splice it down into age categories, our age categories are even smaller. And so we're hungry for people that share those life experiences with us. And this was just a really cool way, like you said, for you to connect with 63 other people from across the nation. So super excited about that for you. Was there maybe anything that surprised you or was off the wall, maybe that you've never seen or heard before, just something that made you go, wow?
Yeah, I think how much on top of things NCBA really is that we don't really they do so much work behind the scenes and try to be aware. They have a whole war room out there dedicated to tracking beef
on the media.
On media.
You got to see the media room.
It was incredible. And so they know if all of a sudden they see beef in any form or mention. So maybe all of a sudden, Taylor Swift has a beef with somebody. So, they pick up some of that traffic too.
Yeah.
But they see when stuff comes across with this high path AI stuff that's been going on, and they get to, just track the ability that they have to track so much across the U.S. It's really comforting at the end of the day. They have got it. They are on top of it so well.
Big Brother's watching.
Yes. And so that was probably what I was most blown away by. It's just man, they go at it up there. They are nonstop. They are working for us, putting your, everything, that we do with our membership dollars, there's not a penny wasted across any of it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a great nugget to share there, and I love that you called it the war room. That's a great description.
It's what it is.
It's literally a room, people. If you can imagine, it's got probably 8 big screen TVs, and each one has a different media monitor on it. One of them's playing the news, like the live news coverage. One of them's got C-SPAN on. And then other ones have different softwares that they pay for that monitor media in different ways and across different platforms. And it's just literally, it's live feed coming in all day. And they'll see an article pop that has the word beef in it, and they can click on that article and track the reach that it's getting, whether it was a positive or a negative impact, the region that it was in, and either decide to develop or not develop a plan to respond based on that coverage that's coming in. So it is, and I know I'm a comms person, I'm a media person, so I totally geek out over it. But yeah, I'm glad you appreciated that. Thank you, Daniel, for appreciating that.
Save the date. The 82nd Annual ACA Convention and Trade Show will be here before you know it. Join us in the heart of Birmingham, February 21st through 22nd of 2025. Be on the lookout for more information coming soon.
If you had to splice down the entire trip, I know it was 10 days and y'all had lots of different stops, but if they said, oh, we can only do 3 days this year, what 2 or 3 stops would you just absolutely not want to miss?
Looking at it from the full perspective, I would probably say the first day at NCBA. Yeah. Just kind of getting the full insight of what they do day in, day out, how they're taking care of things for us. The prep day that we actually spent at the Capitol Hill Club where, they were just going over the policies. It can be a little bit boring information tedious, but it's the most important thing too. It is what is going on in, the U.S. as far as agriculture is concerned today. And then I'm torn between the feed yard or the packing plant, because both of those were.
We'll just combine those into one little stop.
I probably would lean to the packing plant in the day, because it's such an incredible sight to see, and all those they got 1,000+ employees working every day in there, and there's 40+ languages going on at the same time on the cutting floor, and so how it all works together, and it is moving. It is not a slow-paced event on that cutting floor.
Absolutely not. There's lots of knives slinging in there.
And so that would probably be the third stop that I was like, you can't miss out. It's probably going to get some feedback from cutting CAB out of that mix, being the Angus guy, but those are the three that are most impressionable to me, I think. Yeah,
and I think to your point too, you might can Google a picture of some feed yards. Now, I would still say you need to see it with your own eyes, but you can Google a picture. You can't get insider's footage from a meat packing plant. They're pretty tight about cameras in those. So, I think I like those options. If you had to lay out a tour, I think I'd call you and include you in that planning. All right, Daniel, so bringing it back home, you've just been across the nation, but you're also the YCLP council chairman here in Alabama, and that council helps kind of govern the YCLP program. That's the Young Cattlemen's Leadership Program here in the state, and they help lay out the plan for this next class. They help select class members. What are some of the things that you think you could take from YCC on this grand scale and maybe translate it back down here to Alabama to apply it to our state program?
That's a hard picture to paint, because I already feel so much of what we do across 5 sessions for YCLP is basically condensed at the same time in this YCC trip. So they're so relatable already across every aspect, because we start here at the Cattleman's building, and what we do, here locally in the state, and how the checkoff dollars work. And that's exactly how we start the NCBA on the YCC trip. And then we have these different industry tours throughout the state where we see how the beef industry really works in Alabama across all the different operations. And so it's so relatable in so many different areas. It's really, I don't know that I can say that we're missing much from it, because it's such an established program at this point, and the two really would marry up beautifully.
Yeah,
if you look at
they complement each other well. Awesome. Well, that's certainly something that we like to hear. We like to say that the YCLP program is one of our shining star programs of the beef checkoff. So that's awesome that you, in your mind and through your experience, would compare the two. That's really great. So jumping back, think back 4 years ago, you were back in YCLP Class 7. What did you find most valuable about our state program here?
It's the same thing that I said for the YCC trip. It was the relationships still at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was huge. But even further past that, just for my own individual story, I think, I'm not one that went to college for ag related at all. I was off chasing a dream of playing ball, and that's, and I had plans of med school and other things down the line, and that's just not how the Lord had it all shaped up for me at the end of the day. So the opportunity to return home and really felt like it was an extension education opportunity through this YCLP program. So it's 2 parts there. It was a relationship, but it was kind of like I was able to get an education of how really, beef industry works here in the state all throughout too, and get those things intertwined. I think it was what it was the most for me.
Oh, I love that. Because it's so easy to forget that not everybody goes and majors or gets a degree in agriculture that's a farmer. So that's a really great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Last of my little questions here. If you had someone who was maybe on the fence, maybe somebody that's listening right now who is on the fence about applying for the next class of YCLP, which, by the way, that application period will open up end of this year, beginning of 2025. Be on the lookout for that. But if you had somebody that was listening that was maybe on the fence about applying, what would you say to maybe convince them to apply?
The opportunity, it's hard to express how much I valued that experience. And so, if you're someone who's on the fence, that it was like me, like you don't feel like you really went to school for, an ag-related, industry item necessarily, but you're kind of back on the farm now and you don't really know what to do, this is the place for you. Like, we want to help you get fully immersed in all things beef cattle here in the state. And it's a great way just to learn a little nugget, across all the different sectors and, how the Cattlemen's Association works for you. And at the same time, if you feel like, even still, you went to Auburn or you went out to, a different ag school and you got kind of an education train up, it's a great way to make those relationships in state and just get to know people from all across doing different parts of it too. I mean, it's not like it was a bunch of seed stock producers that were in the class with me. It was cow-calf guys. It was stocker guys. It was day cowboys. Even in Alabama, we still have some of those too.
And I mean, it's people who represent kind of other facets of the industry too. Maybe it's a nutrition salesperson.
Yep.
Or a researcher, or it takes all of those things to make out the industry. You've alluded to that a couple of times, but I think something that you were that I was hearing as you were talking was probably the more you think that you don't qualify for YCLP, the more you actually qualify.
100% qualify.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you just like to learn in general, and I mean, we do so much work with extension too, and this past session, they did a lot on winter forages. So if you want to know what options are available to you and, how do I know which forage to pick? They'll talk to you about the research trials that go on here at Auburn across the different, research stations. And so there's endless opportunities in it, whether you want to learn, whether you want to build relationships, whether you just want to know how the Cattlemen's Association really works. There is a place for you in YCLP.
That means we are about to wrap up this episode, but not before we tell you 3 things that you need to know before you go. First, we have steadily been updating the Bama Beef events calendar with all kinds of extension programming, with upcoming cattle sales, with cattlemen's activities that might be coming near you. So if you are looking for ways to learn this fall or fun things to attend as a cattle producer, hop on over to bamabeef.org/events to learn more and explore programs near you. Second, Daniel, did you ever receive one of those Alabama Cattlemen's Foundation scholarships?
I believe I did. It's been a few years back now, but I think every one of me and my siblings did at some point.
There you go. So did I. And so two examples of people who received those scholarships and came back to work in the industry, and your kiddos could be next. Our scholarship program has grown so much over the years and had so much influence over the lives of students who are now active and engaged members of Alabama's beef industry, like Daniel. So mark your calendars, because applications for the 2025-2026 academic year scholarships will open on Monday, September 23rd. That is coming up, folks. We've got tons of opportunities, including scholarships for those seeking to practice rural medicine. Maybe you've got a future ag lawyer in your household. Maybe they're on the equestrian team or the rodeo team. And then, of course, there's plenty of other opportunities for students just simply looking to study agriculture. And by and large, all it takes is for the applicant or a parent or grandparent to be a member in good standing of the ACA for the past 2 consecutive years. All right. And third, this one's kind of fun and new to the show, but today is actually my birthday, and I am in a celebrating mood. So let's do a giveaway. The first person to send me an email this morning with the subject line that reads Cattle Connect Giveaway will win a fun prize package that I'll mail directly to you. We'll see who listens first thing this morning and all the way through.
All right, that's fun there.
So you guys hit your emails right now. Send me an email with a subject line that says Cattle Connect Giveaway. All right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about your experience with YCC. It was awesome, and I'm so glad that you had a fun time.
Absolutely. Anytime.
And with that, we've got a busy day and weekend ahead. We hope to see y'all at today's BCIA Herd Builder Sale in Uniontown. If you see one of us, grab us and say hey. And we all hope that you have a great college football weekend and Labor Day weekend. We'll be back for more Cattle Connect podcast next week.
Well, folks, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cattle Connect, brought to you by the Alabama Cattlemen's Association. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when our next episode goes live. And until next time, remember, beef, it's what's for dinner.